Okay, so today's session is called It's Now Not What You Know, But How Fast You Learn, Automate Data or Become Obsolete. So obviously that's quite a provocative title, so we're expecting a good session. I'm Charlie Coffey, Marketing Manager at Wherescape EMEA. Today's presenter is a guy that a few of you might have crossed paths with in the data world, Dave Van Out. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Charlie. Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, you're there. I thought we'd lost you.
Yes. No, I'm there.
Okay, good. Dave has his own consultancy, Because, and has worked with some big names such as Nike and BMW, but I'll leave it for him to tell you a bit more about that later. Just before we start, I'll give you a quick introduction to Wherescape for those who don't know who we are and what problems we solve. And then 2 minutes after, I'll hand you over to Dave, and we should be done in less than half an hour. So at Wherescape, we see a disconnect today between the volume of data and the number of sources and the business wanting reports in less time. Data automation is a requirement now to close this gap by reducing time to production. And you can see a couple of examples of how much time we save on the slide. An agile data warehouse is mission critical if companies are to be data driven, as opposed to merely using data to validate strategy retrospectively as happened in the past. At Wherescape, we reduce the time cost and risk in building a data warehouse by automating the data warehouse lifecycle where possible, from design and discovery to development and code and deployment. This allows developers to stay in control but increase their productivity by about 5 times, sometimes more, by automating the repetitive time-consuming tasks that they do every day, such as hand-coded. We've got two main products, Wherescape Red and Wherescape 3D. Red is metadata driven and allows developers to drag and drop on a nice GUI from source to target and build data warehouse structures in that manner. The tool then creates the mappings, transformations, and ELT code for the underlying platform in native code as well. All the data warehousing best practices and methodologies are inbuilt through our something like nearly 20 years of experience. There's no black box or black magic. Red just manipulates the data infrastructure you already have in place using the coding language you already use, and it's database agnostic, so you future-proof your architecture and switch database in a couple of years' time if you so wish. Every change that Red commits is fully documented with full data lineage. We find documentation is a huge issue today with companies trying to become lean and agile. Architecture is becoming complex. We know that developers often leave documentation to the last and see it as a bit of a chore. So that feature is always very popular with developers when we tell them at conferences that they never need to write documentation again. We need to know how infrastructures are built to manage dependencies and for if and when the developers that built them move on. Wherescape 3D is our design tool. It allows you to prototype architectures and check them with business users before you commit to build. This can save days or weeks of incorrect work that could be due to merely miscommunication or misunderstanding. So that allows you to work collaboratively with the business because you can show them structures that they understand and in small iterations for agility. It also scopes and profiles data systems and adds lineage for GDPR purposes, which many of our customers found very useful in May. They realized they already had a tool that could scope their systems for GDPR and give them the lineage they needed. Okay, now I'll hand over to Dave for the next 20 minutes or so. So if you have any questions, please type them in the questions section and I'll read them out to Dave at the end. Thanks and enjoy the webinar. Cheers.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Morning, everybody. So next 20 minutes, I want to tell you a bit about automation, or at least my own personal experience with it. Maybe a practical thing if I hope everybody understands and hears me quite loud and clear. If not, just drop something in the chat box and we'll see what we can do about it. Okay, Charlie already mentioned myself, a quick word. I don't want to burden you with anything of my own, but what you're going to get the next 20 minutes is a bit of a mix between business and technology. So that's where I am on a professional level. And I prepared some stuff for you guys to go over in the next 20 minutes. It's a very short time, so I will be speeding up some slides and some specific topics where I feel they are more a kind of a commodity and a kind of a thing that everybody knows, while for specific other things, I will take some more time. And in any case, any questions afterwards, or you want to know more, as Charlie said, just raise the question in the questions pane, and we'll have a look on how we can get you updated with the necessary information. So in a nutshell, on the agenda of today, I got 4 big blocks. I want to start with a kind of a very short introduction on where we are in the world of data analytics, information management. I think the child has been given a lot of names, but a very short introduction on where we are. Next, automation, why I feel it's necessary, and not only zoom into the necessity of it, have a look on what actually is it, very briefly for those who aren't familiar with data warehouse automation, and more importantly, why I feel it is important to think what you want to achieve with a solution like Wherescape before actually buying it, because I think you only get or you don't get a second chance to have a kind of a first impression. Thirdly, I want to share my experiences, what it actually is when you go start working with a solution like Wherescape from a kind of a hands-on perspective. What is plus? What is basically a kind of a burden based upon a specific use case within a large retail organization? And then finally, I want to give you some key messages which I hope inspire you, or at least give you a kind of a motivation to follow up upon this topic after this webinar. All right. So first of all, this is I think, a very familiar quote by James Naisbitt, who said basically, we're drowning in data, but we're still starving in knowledge. And I added a one that we're, aside from drowning in data, also basically being flooded by technology. And I won't say that it is as bad that somebody like George Orwell was right, but if we look towards what is basically needed from a business point of view on an information or a knowledge level, it does seem that we are basically unprepared to extract that kind of knowledge to support that kind of faster decision making that is currently needed. If you look outside of the market, it's always quicker time to market. Give us the insights right now. It has to be cost efficient. And if you see all the investments that we have been doing the past 15 to 20 years in data infrastructure, it seems that we're not basically getting there, or still trying to cope up with the speed on that demand that is currently out there. So if we take one step back and we talk about what it is actually that we want to do, so extracting all those insights to do actually what. And I basically created my definition of what it would be of living in a kind of a data heaven, and ultimately it's always striking a balance between control and agility. And this is a kind of a data heaven quadrant, which gives you a kind of some worlds to live in. So if you have high control, less agility, you get a dictatorship. If you have basically less control, less agility, there is nothing, there is a data desert. If you have lots of agility and less of control, which is currently with the whole agile movement, which is kind of very strong currently in top of minds and within organizations, data anarchy. And ultimately, if you have a striking balance between agility and control, you have a data democracy. And I think for my own, I really prefer having a balance between the two of them, being or eating the best of both worlds, as I'm being between business and technology. The question now is, how do we actually achieve this data democracy? And I think what we need to do is think a bit differently, or at least be creative and be capable, and at least be aware that we need to do things differently, and think about the way that we have done things the past 15 years to do it also differently. And automation can help us doing that. Automation as such isn't new, so it exists already quite some time. But for those who are specifically towards data warehouse automation new, I summed up this definition, and you can find it anywhere. So it isn't a kind of a very sophisticated one, but what's important, and I think if you need to know more, Charlie and the guys can help you out. For me, it's all about creating your data warehouse in a full cycled way. So it's not only about developing or building it. It starts basically from analyzing your source systems, designing your model, develop it, put it to the production, deploy, do some tests afterward, do the changes afterwards, documentation, do the impact analysis. So it is a kind of a complete cycle of building the solution, and not only specifically geared towards creating your tables and stuff like that. And the reason you want to do it by means of a solution like Wherescape is ultimately you want to do it faster, you want to do it cheaper, and you want to do it at a high quality. And I think that's a golden spot within those three triangles, which is ultimately the goal. But I see a lot of organizations who are looking into solutions like this, that these are basically the generic requirements all over the place. Now, as I said at the beginning of my story, that's fine. You want to do things faster, you want to build it faster at a cheaper rate, and of course at a higher quality. But then I think it's more important that you look at it a bit from a more holistic perspective. And I talk about, in this case, positioning data warehouse automation and do it more in a purpled way. So I'm not going to deviate too much about the color, but I think purple people are basically also people basically within business and technology. And also here, I think given the strategy of your organization, you need to think a bit about where does it fit in my infrastructure, where does it fit in my delivery model, where does it fit in my service model, and how can I add the most value to my business customers in that case. So basically staying what it is we want to do from a data analytics or from a kind of a business intelligence analytics perspective. We want to connect people with the knowledge. So we don't want to drown in information. We want to connect people knowledge. And it is always a kind of a game between business and technology or business and IT. And within that playing field, I think we have, on the one hand, the infrastructure and the means that are more geared towards technology and specifically towards the extracting knowledge, so the ETL way, that we talk about more the traditional way of doing things. So, and I've just put some examples over here, Informatica, SSAS, by example. There are many, many more, but in general, they share some specific characteristics. So they give you control, they're enterprise aligned, and basically they're also a kind of a synonym for giving you good quality, but they're not cheap. And often it takes a lot of time to perform any changes or getting any kind of builds done on that one, or at least that is the perception they have from a business perspective. On the other hand, you got more what I would like to call the desktop ETL solutions. Alteryx is a perfect example, but again, there are many more, and they're quite the opposite on characteristics. And they're also very much in the game currently. The last few years, they're booming incredibly. Why? Because they're following quite an agile philosophy. They're flexible. Anybody can do it. It's a desktop spread. It's fast, but on the other hand, it isn't always cheap. Supposedly what people might think. And also it gives you problems when you want to leverage or you want to scale what you have built in the organization, or even worse, when people are leaving the organization, they always take, in a lot of cases, the knowledge with them in the way that the solution has been built. So also here you see a kind of a opposite between the two of them. And in my opinion, data warehouse automation fits quite nicely in between of them. So on the one hand, it offers you the quality, the control, it offers you the leverage you can have to what you have built to also be scalable in a qualitative way in the organization, while at the other hand, it also allows you to be creative. It also allows you to do some prototyping, which gives you the incredible advantage of getting closer to your business, speak as one person around the table with the same language, and basically showing them already what you have built way in advance compared to a more classic approach. So this is a way which I think is very good to introduce data warehouse automation in an organization, so people have an understanding and already can be guided towards some change. Because one of the questions you often get is, okay, data warehouse automation, what does basically mean? Will we need to get rid of all the classic ETL tools that we have, and will they become obsolete and something of the past? Well, in my opinion, no, because I think we're living in a quite hybrid landscape, not only from an ETL perspective, but also if you look at from a more infrastructure perspective in whole. So your whole idea between on-premise and on-premise towards cloud, that's the same hybrid situation over there. So I think classic ETL tools like the one I mentioned on the previous slide are not to be forgotten. So there always be a kind of a need to integrate data. It never has been this high. So the need to connect to original source systems to debug and maintain code will be there. And on the other hand, I think from a financial perspective, you don't want to redo your complete infrastructure, which you have been investing already in the 15 years. However, I think using data warehouse automation can give you the advantage of doing things faster in any case, and that's a kind of a testimonial from my personal experience, which I can vouch for. But more importantly, it's not only about doing things faster, and here is the biggest crook, I think, in the whole story. It ultimately comes down in doing things faster allows you to have more time available to do, on the one hand, you could say, do more work with less resources, but that would be an easy trap. In my opinion, the most value is right there in giving you the opportunity to understand better what the requirements are, to understand even more what it takes to turn the available wealth of data into knowledge by speaking the same language with your business customers. So basically elevating the manner of thinking where it needs to be, geared towards solving the critical business questions rather than basically coding the more commodity and low value work. So focus upon the source and target models, and basically be a bit free from any constraints you might have, which are geared or related to the way that you have been working the past years by old tools or by tools that do not support this way of working. Additionally, another question that comes related with that one, and that's one you hear a lot, and I want to quickly address. Well, from a developer's point of view, will my work become obsolete? And this slide is a bit, it's not fully catching the phrase, so I'm not advertising here that anybody should apply for a job at Wherescape or any other company. But what I want to say with this one is, I think, in my opinion, there is a big advantage in working with a tool, right? Because it gives you more freedom in understanding what needs to be built rather than building anything and do the validation afterwards. So it's the job of a developer does not become obsolete. It changes, and in my opinion, it gets even more important in an organization as it gets closer to answering business questions in a more efficient, in a more qualitative manner. So that was basically kind of a first chapter, the first two chapters where I talked about data warehouse automation, what it is, how you can potentially introduce it in an organization, and why it is important to do so, and then highlight a bit on what are the dangers, or what are maybe a kind of a strange ideas which people might have towards a solution like this, like, okay, does it make tools obsolete, or does it change our jobs? Yes, but in my opinion, it adds a lot of value. Now, turning into that conceptual theory, or a more kind of a talk into action, I wanted to give you some examples in this case on an implementation I did with a big retail customer, so a kind of a testimonial, because I don't want to only talk about the conceptual things. I only want to share also some of my experience when implementing a solution like this. And in this case, this is an example of a retailer, and I think this picture shows which one it is. So it's Nike. I was contracted by them for three years and a half. And back then, I think challenges over there in that organization are quite similar to the ones I see currently at the organization I'm serving, but also I think in your organization. So requirements from a business are rapidly changing, obviously. They want to have insights at a more faster pace, cheaper pace. Data sources become more and more diverse and complex. I think that's also for sure. And more importantly, what we needed to have back then in that organization is business-facing capabilities, people who are able to talk with their business, deliver some stuff on the go, and have a kind of a very value-based conversation rather than do a kind of a classical waterfall approach in getting requirements translated in user stories, etc., etc., etc. So 3 big challenges ahead at that time, while we observed that the way or the time to market to build solutions was way too long, and the process is way too costly. And more importantly, I think if anything was built and it was built to last, in that case, changing it would take forever, again losing business attention and business focus. So there was this big disconnect. So at that time, we defined the objectives, and you see over here, which are basically the same as I said earlier on, the golden spot between speed, flexibility, and quality. So accelerate the building process on the one hand, doing it in a flexible way, in a way that we could change stuff afterwards, or doing the change request in a fluid way, in a minimal amount of time, but also at the same time guaranteeing that we do it in a qualitative way, in the sense that we don't need to do a lot of rework afterwards. And if rework is needed, at least that we would have some kind of a root cause or impact analysis at hand in order to identify the most critical issues in a fast and efficient manner. What you do back then, I don't think it's that kind of a secret. You go to the drawing board, you write your requirements, you see what are the must-haves, what are the categories you need to do, and you do a kind of an RFP, or you do a proof of concept like the one we did back then. So we evaluated some tools, and one of them was Wherescape, and in the summer of 2015, the organization decided to go with Wherescape. Now, the reason for it, not only because they scored best in an objective way on the requirements, as I've shown previously, but more importantly, we were quite driven in basically doing a shift from bodies to brains. So we wanted to automate as much as possible, and we didn't want to throw basically more bodies to the problem. We wanted to work a bit smarter. We wanted to work efficiently, and we wanted to use all the smart people in the organization by freeing them up from low labor work, low value work, and just use their brains, because I think that's ultimately what gives you the competitive advantage in an organization. Now, the projects, there are very big projects in that organization, but one we decided to start with was a build of a new warehouse back then. So we had a kind of a reporting need for a new warehouse, which was basically built from the ground up. So there was this urgent need in developing the reporting environment. And the advantage we had in this case was that the first project we tackled, in this case, could do a kind of a lift and shift of an existing environment, which was based on SQL by using a classic integration services setup. And the idea was to embark on this path and do a kind of a lift and shift and port not to SQL Server, but port to Teradata in that case, as that was at that time the platform from a target state that was chosen. So we started this project at the end of September, beginning of October. We had a team of 4 people who had never worked with Wherescape, who didn't have any kind of affiliations with the new target system. And we realized a kind of a first UIT production into the 4th of January, and the project went go live, I think, at the beginning of April. So, which was quite an incredible achievement, although it was merely a kind of a lift and shift. So we didn't really unlock yet the full potential, but we did a lift and shift of a complete environment in a complete new environment, in a complete new target environment. Which was a kind of a very stressful and a very challenging project. Now, what most people say is, okay, that's all fine, Dave, but what does it basically mean? And often people ask from a kind of a usage perspective, what are we talking about? And in this case, to give you some of the examples, you see here that we are able to manage the whole lot of work in a robust and consistent way. And I'm going to zoom into that a bit later on. So we're managing 350,000 lines of code, 1,000 views, the amount of objects, the amount of tables. So quite a vast project. And certainly if you know, again, that the team was quite not there from a maturity level to make the switch from a more SQL-oriented way of working, which isn't bad in any case, to a more automated way of working by means of a lead time of 3 months. Now, that specific organization is quite challenging, and this picture illustrates it. On the right-hand side, you see the existing warehouse. On the left-hand side, that's the warehouse that is currently in the works. So that's due for opening in April this year. So the right-hand, which was done by Wherescape, as I showed on the earlier slides, handles footwear. On the left hand, that's the new one for Nike in Europe. That's going to handle the apparel stuff. And that's, again, the right one existed, the left one is being built. So again, another one popping up. And together with that one, also from an infrastructure point of view, a kind of a change that was going on, that the decision was taken to move stuff into the cloud. Again, what you get over there is, okay, we have built a lot of stuff in a very limited time, but then what else can be leveraged from the work towards the new environment? Although it's a bit different from a kind of the products we are distributing over there, the way of working and the process remains the same. And on the other hand, given the fact that we're shifting from an on-prem to a cloud platform, okay, what can be done, what can be leveraged from the work that has been done in the past? And I can say on that one quite a lot, because we designed there a kind of a future-proof approach. Ultimately, due to the fact, and that's the nature of the Wherescape product, it is of course metadata driven. You have repeatable metadata driven patterns. I'm not going to zoom in too much about details about that one, but that's core of the product. So ultimately what you get is you get the flexibility to switch to another platform, so we can easily adapt to another platform, in this case a cloud platform, simply by the fact that you can regenerate the code. You can throw away your old code, regenerate the code in which the platform, in this case was Snowflake, is generated. So you can generate your native code by means of the metadata, which is ultimately already being designed for the first time with the first TC. So you see, you got a very strong approach where you build it once and you get a repeatable pattern which can be reused in time for similar requests, ultimately gaining costs, of course, gaining your time to market, and do it in a kind of a very qualitative way. Summarizing the pluses and minuses from my experience in this specific case. So a lot of pluses. So yes, is it faster? Yes. So what Charlie said at the beginning, how much faster? In my experience, through this, between 6 and 8 times faster. You would get the better business insight because we had conversations with our business partners. The core DNA knowledge is secure because it's all being stored in the repository and the metadata repository on that hand side. So we're not longer burdened by people leaving the organization and build their own stuff. A clear and consistent way of working, because ultimately you have standards that are being automated, which enforces people to do stuff in a similar way. So there is no more Babylonical language over there, so people really understood what they were doing. And finally, obviously, documentation, auditability, and impact analysis, which you get basically for free when you go for a product like Wherescape. Also, some downsides in the story. It is a capex investment, so it's buy versus build. So not only from a financial perspective, but also from a strategic perspective, it can depend if you rather build or buy stuff within an organization. There is a learning curve, but again, that's related to the size and complexity of project and team setup. You have to evaluate best fit for purpose, and that's an important one because I'm a strong believer for a solution like Wherescape or data warehouse automation, but it is not like it is a one fit for all. So you have to carefully evaluate for which solution or for which challenge you're gonna use it, and for which one it is maybe a kind of a one-off or maybe not that suitable. And then 4 and 5, very importantly, you have to be able to rethink best practices, or at least organizational specific procedures in the organization. Of course, new technology, if you can call data warehouse automation new in that understanding, doesn't match with old way of thinking. So you have to be able to cross some barriers and doing things differently in order to achieve your biggest goal. Finally, and I think I'm coming slowly to the end of my talk, a first key message, does it do what it promises to deliver? Yes. So in my personal experience, it is a solution for that cumbersome, labor-intensive, low-value work. It does things faster. It gains you that efficiency. So yes, I think for me, that's already a no-brainer. However, it would be, in my opinion, a pity if that would be the only objective you want to realize, because for me, it means a lot more. For me, it's basically an instrument for change, for doing things in another way, being creative, being able to think outside the box. And most importantly, and I think that's a key message in my story, I think it's always about the people. So a solution like Wherescape can actually do the work of 50 ordinary men. But in my opinion, Wherescape or any kind of solution can't replace the work of one extraordinary man or woman. So it still remains a people's business, and it's still vital that you understand what you want to achieve with it, how you want to position it in the organization, and ultimately what are the success criteria you want to do with it. Thank you. And now I'm coming to the end of my talk.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Hope you all enjoyed the session. As for next steps, we're hosting 2 of our test drive events in November, in London on November the 1st, on the South Bank, and Dublin on November the 19th at Microsoft HQ. These events are a chance for you to take to laptops and try Wherescape for yourself to see how it will change your working life. We put you in real life scenarios faced by data teams and show you just how much time you'd save with automation compared to how you might do it today. We also have a case study webinar with Admiral Group on October the 18th, in which they'll tell you what they achieved with data automation and how it's transformed the way they work and continue to work. I'll send you a follow-up email with all these details in the next couple of days. Okay, just about past, so thanks for listening. And if you have any further questions, please get in touch with me. Thanks a lot.